Welcome to Taking a Stab, Rabies and Germs, and as always, I'll be delving deep into the depravity and sharing my thoughts and opinion on horror films of today and yesteryear. My name's McConnaughay, and you're either watching this on the official NJ Today YouTube channel or on Mishmashers.com, and for today's video, I'll be sharing my thoughts on Hellraiser Judgment. I have a love and hate mixed bag of emotions when it comes to the Hellraiser franchise. Clive Barker's novella, The Hellbound Heart, spun an ugly tale that provided a perspective on all the different things to be afraid of, and the graphic novels that followed, and the Scarlet Gospel novel, all provided a uniqueness of their own. Unfortunately, I don't think the same can be argued for the Hellraiser film series. I thought about an edition of Taking a Stab where I looked at each individual Hellraiser film, but I opted against it, because frankly, it isn't a series I really care much for or about. The first Hellraiser is oftentimes deemed as the best, but I found it dull. I respect Clive Barker as an artist, but I don't think he brought the most out of his characters in that film. Thereafter, Hellraiser bombed its way from theaters with a fourth film that was god-awful, strangely blending elements of science fiction into the fray with bad results. The most peculiar aspect is, my favorite of the Hellraiser series, Hellraiser Inferno, was the first of the series not to be released in theaters and is the first film of the series not to have Clive Barker's involvement in some capacity. I didn't think Inferno was a great film by any stretch, and I don't think it had the best ideas, but as far as execution is concerned, I thought director Scott Derrickson, who later went on to direct one of my favorite horror films, Sinister, was up to the task. After Inferno, the series continued where it left off, with another 4 films, and they were each varying levels of bad, but bad all the same. Everyone likes to single out Hellraiser Revelations as the worst. Even Clive Barker disowned it, and I think a lot of that has to do with them recasting Doug Bradley as Pinhead. But honestly, Revelations was not the end-all of badness, or at least it wasn't so much worse than Hellworld or Hellseeker that it's worth disowning and keeping them. Most fans hope that Clive Barker will be allowed to helm the series again, what with how the series has been held captive by its production company for all these years, releasing titles in mind mostly to keep the rights of the series. Me, I definitely prefer to see Clive Barker try his hand with an adaptation of the Scarlet Gospels, or something of that refrain, but I don't know the likelihood of that happening anytime soon. This film, Hellraiser Judgment, is directed by Gary J. Tunnicliffe, whose name might induce cringe-level dismay when I tell you he's otherwise credited for writing the screenplay of Hellraiser Revelations. I can ease your mind by telling you that Hellraiser Judgment is a better film than Hellraiser Revelations, and the best film of the series since Hellraiser Inferno. This isn't saying a whole lot, but yeah, it isn't saying a whole lot. It is the 10th film in the series, and it focuses on a man named Sean Carter, a detective investigating a serial killer who seems to be inspired by the Commandments, all while delving deeper into a threat of otherworldly proportions. On my end, from the description, I was fascinated, mostly because of the way it called back to Hellraiser Inferno. But like Inferno, I thought to myself it sounded like what would likely be a generic crime thriller. Unfortunately, the truth was in the description, and Hellraiser Judgment is, in fact, a generic crime thriller. On the bright side, though, there is some reason for celebration. This recent iteration of the series is brimming with ideas, which, while aren't done like they could be, are still notable. The depiction is a little on the nose in some aspects, with eerily familiar piano music comprising the score, but it does offer the sentiment of an ugly and despicable world, and I think that's something not captured in a lot of Hellraiser films. It feels more realized than usual, for lack of a better phrase. I think it shows a lot of work went into the added mythology, and it's nice to see the director approach this with inspiration instead of simply a market cash-in. I also enjoyed the addition of the Auditor, who is incidentally played by the director of the film, who I thought did his role well. Paul T. Taylor also did well as Pinhead. I don't have that much affection for Doug Bradley's portrayal like some do. I thought his portrayal was commendable, but I don't believe there was ever a whole lot of demand out of the portrayal in the first place other than a deep voice and an intimidating presence. And with that, I think Paul T. Taylor checked all the boxes just fine. The Assessor is my least favorite aspect of the film in terms of badness. A gluttonous member of the Inquisition that gobbles up pieces of paper drowned with children's tears in scenes that made me cringe in how over-the-top and bad they were. As far as the other actors are concerned, I thought they were passable enough, delivering their lines without really anything worth highlighting about them. Like I said, it feels very much like an underdeveloped police procedure film in those aspects. Although I will mention how they had Heather Langenkamp from A Nightmare on Elm Street, and all she did was play an obscene landlady for a couple of minutes. The film clocks out at about an hour and 17 minutes, which is short even by horror standards, although is not uncommon from recent Hellraiser installments. To reiterate, the new Judgment film has enjoyable aspects, in particular when the Auditor or Pinhead is around, But when they're not around, it plays out like a straightforward catch-a-killer police procedure film. And those moments aren't terrible, even if they are conventional. What really throws the film out of whack is the last 20 or so minutes of the film. Basically, in a twist that is horribly alluded to once or twice only a little bit prior, everything concludes in what feels like a very half-assed fashion. They even throw some unnecessary happenings with Pinhead at the end that feel completely out of nowhere. Simply put, Hellraiser Judgment really stinks up the place in its home stretch, and although it would have exposed us to more dull police procedure, at least it would have been a better sum of all parts had they added another 20 or so minutes to let the story breathe a little more, because as it stands, it felt incredibly rushed. That's my thoughts though, a so-so type film. I might have called it decent had they not swallowed their tail at the end, because I legitimately enjoyed some of the ideas that were implemented, even if I was never engrossed in the actual story. Instead, though, I would have to call it below average, which still, in what says more about the series than the film itself, it stands as one of the best films in the Hellraiser series. I like that cover, too. These are only my thoughts, however, and I'd love to know what you think. And with that being said, feel free to let me know your thoughts over Hellraiser Judgment in the comment section below. This has been Taking a Stab, and I'll see you next week on Mishmashers.com when I take a look at another film.